I mean, I know the whole, like, we must respect our children's privacy. No, you actually shouldn't. I'm sorry, privacy, the way that they describe it now, especially when kids those age, that's a brand new concept in all of human history. Yeah. We have never had this much privacy ever. And that level of privacy at that age, in my opinion, is not a good thing. Because, and I'm not saying that you should go necessarily snoop on your kids' sex lives, but I do think you should snoop on their online gaming lives. Because it's perfectly natural as far as, like, our biology. We're designed at, like, 14, 15 to start being like, hey, what are your parts like? My parts are starting to really interest me. Like, sorry, that's biology. But finding out, like, are they screaming Nazi epithets at people? That's something you need to know. Yeah. Don't be ashamed to go, you know, for one thing, game in the same room with them. Heaven forbid, play games with them would be a great thing.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to suggest. I think that's actually a really good idea. Because it's like, there's no better way to know what the experience is like than to actually do it yourself.
Yeah. Like, one of my best memories of growing up, and this was well before console gaming, my mother and I were very poor, and our computers were horribly out of date. So even after there weren't a whole lot of Commodore 64s left, that's what we had. And so we're playing, like, Ultima 4 in the 90s, but... Oh my god. Like I said, if you're poor, you take the computers that you've got. Yes, who lives right here in Austin?
That's just throwback. That was my OMG was coming.
But the point is, even though it wasn't even a multiplayer game, we would sit together in front of the computer, play it, take turns actually running things, and even if it's an older game and you don't have a lot of money to afford the newest, neatest console, if you're doing it with your kid, they're gonna enjoy it, as long as you don't hog the console. You gotta let them actually touch things too. You gotta let them make some mistakes. So we would actually, like, we had a timer every hour. We'd trade places.
Nice.
And kids remember things like that. They remember that quality time. I'm sure that your son is going to grow up having some memories of sitting down and playing some games with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my game plan is already this. We're gonna start in Nintendo and go up. Mm-hmm. You know, when the next, and I think even by the time he hits 7, which is like 4 years from now, I think we're still going to be sitting on this current generation of PS4 and Xbox One, you know? So by the time he gets to that age, they'll probably maybe just be coming, they're saying consoles are dead, this is going to be the last generation, but we'll see. And by then, if the trend's still going, by the time he's 7 or 8, and it's time for him to come into the next gen stuff, we'll probably be around that transition period. But yeah, my whole plan was like, okay, this kid's going to start early. We're going to start with some Super Mario. Yeah. You know, then we're going to go into Duck Hunt. And then we're going to go into Super Metroid and Super Mario.
And it's awesome that you've actually got a plan. Yeah. I'm going to throw out there, when you were talking about kids that don't necessarily have a father around, like I didn't have a father around either, if you're gaming with your mother, there are things you're not going to say in front of your mother. Because... one would hope not, that's true. But I think that even the most foul-mouthed kid is probably not going to be screaming racial and sexual epithets with mom playing next to him. So the more time that you spend... And these games are fun, ladies. I promise you these games are fun. Even if you're looking at it going, oh, dear God, I cannot make myself play Grand Theft Auto. That's okay. The shooting games are surprisingly cathartic. Yeah. Give it a try.
Yeah. Once you beat up your first pimp, you will be hooked. You will be hooked!
When I say the shooting games, I mean more something like Halo or something along those lines.
FPS.
Yeah. First-person shooters, because those are easy ones to get kids interested in, because you get to shoot people!
Yeah, you get to shoot people.
And don't be afraid. I mean, even if your kid feels like you're holding him back because you're not learning fast enough, what if he comes home one day, or she, but we're talking about kids and violence, so more likely he, in this particular case, just statistically, comes home and sees mom practicing her first-person shooter. I think he's going to have an awesome story the next day about how cool his mom is.
Yeah.
Because you're just practicing it to hang out with him, but... And you might
not only that, but you could, it's not 100%, but the fact that as a parent you don't know as much as they might, or they do, or they think they do. Yeah. You get to bring out those leadership skills in them. You know, if they start taking the initiative. Okay, well look, here's the controller layout. This button does this, and this button does that, and these are the directional buttons. And they start showing you how to do it. And if you start learning and showing how, hey, this kid's a good teacher. You know, even at my kid's early age, and I know people hate to hear, oh, my kid does this, my kid does that. But consistently, from, as soon as he could walk and talk, my kid is always, he always wants stuff that has to do with doctor stuff. I want to hear your heartbeat. Yeah. Or I want, he wants to work on pets, and he gets scissors. Look, I fixed his leg, and I did this and that. So it's like, the kid's already showing a knack for certain. So I lead him in that direction, because who knows, he might want to be a veterinarian, and it just comes as a natural thing. So I was like, all right, well, cool. If he wants this, then we'll go ahead and get this. And if it's, you know, I give them choices, you know, because kids, they want everything.
Yeah.
So that's another factor you have to think of. So if they say, oh, I want a video game and I want this doctor kit, I'm like, okay, well, you can take one.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Yeah.
And if they pick the doctor kit,
that's not quite as related to the concept.
It isn't related.
But we're gonna rate it in again.
As far as game genres go, yeah, you could still use that same rhetoric to where it's like, oh well, both of these games are $10, Mom. You can afford both of them, and it's Lego.
Although
Marvel.
these days it's gonna be more like $60.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's say they're on sale or something. You know, it's like, and it's Call of Duty and it's Lego Marvel. I want both of them. It's like, well, pick one.
Now, this might sound like a weird thing to throw out there, and I know that kids might protest, but if you're poor, if you're growing up and you're behind the system, for you like we were, I think there's nothing wrong with going out there and getting your kid like a PS2 at this point, and every single PS2 game ever made. Oh my God, for one thing, they won't be online, and for another thing, it'll cost you like $200 for everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that's getting really popular, actually, is retro gaming. You know, it's like, at one point it was like you would have to go to like garage sales and eBay to find the older consoles, and like, there's a store, Game Over Games, which is just exploding in popularity, and that's all it is. Like, people are going back and getting these old systems and playing these old games, and like you said, yeah, they're not online, and it's like, and going to Jay's point as well, it's like you can start your kids off on these other games, which aren't as violent. You don't have to start them off with the GTAs, you know, actually letting them age with the games the way that, you know, a lot of us have.
I wonder if some of that horrible behavior is the fact that most of these kids had nothing but, you know, some little handheld console that doesn't have a whole lot of interactivity, and then they go from that straight to GTA or something along those lines. When they get their first Xbox, it'll come with a Madden game. They all come with an Madden, and that's required by law at this point. And then they also throw on some really, really violent online game, and as you said with the Xbox, they all come with a microphone. So the very first exposure they get to that style of gaming is the screaming and all of that, and the parents don't want to hear it. They walk out of the room, whatever. You gotta ease them into that culture instead of just dropping them into it.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, even going back to the original point with the gangster dudes, you know, it takes a lot of parental involvement. Whether you have a single parent, you know, you said you had no father figure, and I met a guy once at a playground. We were asking about where the mom was, and then he said. He looked at his daughter and said, "Where's your mom?" And she pointed at him. I was like, "Where's your dad?" And she pointed at him. He's like, "I'm the mom and the dad."
Neat.
Yeah, so, and I was like, wow, he must be a really good dude. And obviously the love was there on both sides. But yeah, you have to have that kind of relationship. Whether and I understand it's way harder. Yeah. It is way harder when you have a single parent. And when you get older as a child, I'm sure you appreciate that. You know, you learn that kind of appreciation. And it's a real common thing now, but there has to be that level of involvement. Without that level of involvement, I would even say just don't even get into the video game thing, because working in retail, I've seen a lot of kids, 6 to 10-year-olds, not even hitting puberty, gearing their mom or their dad like, yeah, I want this game. And it was, at the time I was working at Target, a lot of kids, oh my God, so many small kids. It was like Grand Theft Auto 3 on PlayStation 2 back in the day. I think PS4 was just coming out, but it was always, oh yeah, I want this Grand Theft Auto. All my friends are playing it and stuff like that. And it was just, I actually would talk some parents out of it. It's like, I wouldn't recommend this game. There's a lot of violence for a kid his age. Yeah. I was like, I would ask them, would you let your kid right now watch Terminator 2 unsupervised? And if they said no, I would be like, then don't get this game. Yeah. You need to get them a different game. Here, take Shadow of Colossus. Yeah. You know, take Ico. Take any of these other expansive, beautiful stories of video games and let him play that. Do not let your kid play Grand Theft Auto.
So tying it back, though, so we've got the culture we've got. It does exist. Wishing that it was better isn't going to make it go away. But what do you guys think can actually be done? Because one of the things that we discussed earlier was the idea that maybe get some of these guys that are in prison to be game mods. As far as like, hey, I know you think that out there in the real world, if you're actually committing these crimes, you know, outside of Grand Theft Auto, it's going to be awesome. By the way, I'm in here for life.
Yeah. It's so hard to say, and Prometheus probably backed me up on this. I just, honestly, I don't think here in America, it's very chauvinistic, in the USA, we don't have the kind, we're not at at that level in our.
Well, we're being
society.
hypothetical with crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
we are, and honestly, I do think it's possible. But I think where we're at as a culture, and here in the U.S., I don't think we're going to see it. Maybe in our lifetime, but probably towards our later years. Mm-hmm. But right now, as it stands, I don't think we're not going to see the rehabilitative spot of society, especially with the people that work in the industry are largely conservative. Mm-hmm. So it's more like, oh, well, they're scum of the universe. These guys are scum, and they are scum. We all understand that.
And the unfortunate thing is so many of them, like I said, get into it really young with drugs because they're poor and they're bored, and their lives could have gone a different direction, possibly with video games.
Yeah, no one sees it from the rehabilitative side. It's like these guys have made their decisions, and I understand, and I get it. You should be liable for your actions, but a lot of these guys don't understand that either. And because there's no rehabilitative system that we have in place, that's never going to happen. They're never going to see until they come in their later years where it's too late to rehab. They're already too far gone. So even if they come to that realization that, like, wow, I've made a lot of mistakes in life, it doesn't matter because they're like, well, I'm 50, I'm 60, I have all these issues.
At this point is
being a bag boy is too degrading.
Yeah.
Being a cashier is too degrading for me.
So, what do you think as far as, is there anything that can be done realistically to try and provide some better role models, or just to have adult men in those communities telling the 14-year-olds, shut up, that is not appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to go about it. I mean, in one way, if you just look at it specifically in the jail system, and when people are in the, something with juveniles, they're 14, 15, they're in Texas, it's TYC, and,
what's that mean?
It's Texas Youth Commission.
Okay.
So basically, if people that are familiar with Scared Straight, like, it's a show, they have the inmates that are doing life sentences, and they volunteer for this program to tell kids, like, hey, jail's not fun, prison is not fun. And I think doing that preventatively, because that's what it is. Like, once you're at a certain point in the jail system, it's very difficult to get out. Yeah. So having people that can talk to them and speak to them and tell them, like, not to get involved with this, and it's someone who they're actually going to listen to because they have actually been there.
Yeah.
They, these are people where they're going to respect them because they see them as someone who's in the same situation that they're in. So in that regards, I see that, that they can do more of those type of things. As it relates to video games, I can see people putting together, like, perhaps, like, groups or events and stuff like that where people, not only, like, gear people, like you said, like, if we actually had video game creators and designers, they don't just gear them necessarily to also just playing the video games, because, you can say you can build that addiction, which keeps them off the streets and doing things that are going to land them in jail. But on top of that, they can actually learn a skill, which is incredibly important.
You mean crafting in World of Warcraft isn't a job skill?
Well, technically, in this context, we're gonna
only in China is what we're saying is that a job skill.
Yeah. So, but I mean, basically, yeah. I mean, if they actually learn, be able to produce the graphics, or even the music, or the coding, or whatever aspect of the video games that go in there, I think it'd be cool to have a program where they actually go and they play the games. It's like, okay, well, these are all the elements that go inside of making them, and you could actually try and learn them. So, I think it's something that would need structure to really be effective. But I think it's doable.
Yeah.
Well, especially at the juvie level.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, I know that they're not as keen on rehabilitation in general, but I feel like, and you guys please correct me if I'm wrong, there's a little bit more hope for the juvies. They're technically in a different system.
There is, but even from, like, the success stories you see on those Scared Straight programs, it literally takes a village. Like, there was one I was watching where it was two brothers. One was, like, 13 and one was 11. And by the one that was 11, basically mimicked everything his older brother did. And his older brother was a little dickbag. Yeah. Sorry to say, he was a little bag of dicks. And they did the Scared Straight program, and the older brother was just like, wow, he was literally scared. I don't think he was scared. I think he just realized, after his parents divorced, he was acting this way. He was like, I think I want something better. I think I want to be a role model for my little brother. Well, the little brother didn't see it that way. He saw his older brother as a big fat and started disrespecting him, while the older brother concentrated on himself, started, being more interactive with his parents and more vocal, while at the same time, the local police officer that were in charge of the juvenile program came in and did weekly checks, daily checks, and like, hey, how you doing? And they would have, like, 20-minute chats with each of them. So in that sense, you need those kinds of programs as well. So like literally, it takes a village. You need checks, and you need balances, and you need people to constantly keep checking in to make them feel like what they're doing.
But what we're trying to do here are simple Band-Aid solutions with this discussion.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand simple Band-Aid, but I think...
You're trying to have a serious discussion about reforming the entire criminal justice system. We're like, video games are awesome!
Well, as far as concerning video games, I think you can do the same thing and have the same checks in place, but then you would also need to bring in the factor of local developers, local publishers coming in and setting up programs, not just for entitled... youngsters, but also for minority impoverished kids in those types of communities, and giving them those chances. Like, hey, you know, we're gonna get a bus, we're gonna meet at this school, and if you guys can, you know, we'll sign you kids up, and we'll select a handful. You know, even if you have this little juvie record, and we'll see how you do, and we'll have people.
Absolutely love to see a video game camp type of thing for kids that are specifically in juvie.
Well, I would even say it would even have to be a camp if
I'm just going to call it
like
that, we have after school program or whatever.
I think EA is somewhere here down the street. I don't want to put that out there, but you know, I know people that work there. But yeah, they're not too far from a couple of schools around here, and if they did a program, you know, I know further down the road there's not so great.
He's not saying I'm not living in the best part of Austin.
Yeah, she's saying she's living in the better part of a not so great part.
Yeah. I'm in the gentrified section of the ghetto.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. So
moving on upside. But yeah, if they decided to reach out along with the local law enforcement community to bring a program together to where they could get some kids into this program and turn their lives around, and you know, music's a big thing, in, not only in any culture you go to, but also in the music in the video game business. You know, music sets the mood for the type of game you're playing, so it's very important. You know, if you ever tried...
But backing up to, like, making this either an after-school program or something like that, I love that idea. I think it'd be fantastic if... Because I'm sure that there's got to be some type of tax breaks out there that you could get for setting up we're going to help disadvantaged, you know, kids with a juvie record by teaching them actual marketable skills in the video game industry. And for how many kids out there would that not be a dream job? Like, you're going to teach me how to work at a video game company?
Yeah. And all I got to do is stay on the straight and narrow path and get good grades. Yeah. You know, that's all it takes.
I would say, and people hate me when I say this, sometimes just getting them that job skills is more important than necessarily the best grades. Like, if they can maintain a C average, just enough to pass if they're doing well in that juvie program.
Yeah, because, I mean, that's one of those things where it's like, you know, grades, I mean, they're important on paper. They're important, you know, with blend schools, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, if you're going to do a job, like, having the actual hard skills to do that job is what's important.
I mean, don't hate on me, academics. I got a master's degree. I loved getting my education. But I also ended up teaching for a while, and I'm really realistic about the fact that most people I was teaching were there because they wanted to get a job. And they would ask me, like, what is your class on Roman history? And it teach me about getting a job. And, man, I had to make it relevant, which, by the way, I did. But the point being... That's actually a really good practical solution that people, if anyone watching this that has kids that you're worried about, why not write to EA? Tweet to them. They respond to tweets really well. Set up a hashtag. We should do that. Yeah. We should set up a hashtag of, what would we call it? You can tell we're totally actually doing this entire podcast on the fly.
You think games. I don't know, something.
Well, no, like, I don't want to pick on EA, but something about juvie rehab through games.
Yeah.
Something. We'll come up with something and it'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect. Yes. Look for him there.
That.
Because I think that this is a solvable problem. Problem one, getting the kids off the street. And I know this God, I sound like Nancy Reagan. Just say no, kids, but say yes to video games. But giving them something that actually occupies their time, because saying, oh, go find a job, what job? Grown-ups can't find jobs. Yeah. Telling teenagers go find a job, that's like saying grow some wings at this point in time. Other than buffalo wings. You just staple them on back there. Exactly. The sauce dripping off of it. Yeah.
Sauce dripping off the bone.
But in all seriousness, like, playing the games is a great way to make sure your kid is actually occupied in time that they can't have a job, they're not in school, they finish their homework, they might not be hanging out with the best people, get them hooked on the games. If they're already hooked on something awful, let's see if we can try and encourage some game developers or some big game companies out there to see if they can get tax breaks. Maybe not in Texas. I don't know if Texas is
Texas actually has a really good tax incentive program.
Oh,
That's why companies like BioWare and EA came here in the first place.
Okay.
Rick Perry actually set up a program to where they get huge tax cuts just for coming here. And I think...
And wouldn't it be awesome if they could apply some of that towards, we're going to take some kids in juvie, we're going to teach them skills where they'll want to come back and work for us when they're done, but they'll make it out of high school. The number one thing I'd say to require in it is that that their juvie record stays clean. Yeah. More so than grades. That you show up to the sessions, you learn how to code, you're not obligated to work with us, but by the way, we know you, and that increases your chance of getting a job with any place. That's what internships are for. I would love that. So now, our last problem, who are going to be the grown-ups to get in there and moderate these games and tell these kids, no, that's just unacceptable?
As far as the kids online?
Yeah.
That's a tough one. That's one of the things where, because I mean, online games really aren't moderated at all, unless you're like playing on someone's personal server and they'll boot you when you act.
Or like a MMO, like World of Warcraft or something, where they have they pay moderators to be on there. It's not that easy for console games when there's so many console games out there, where MMOs are specifically designed with a plan in motion, and moderators fit into that whole pricing mold and the way they're setting up their community. But as far as online games, World of Warcraft...
See, I'm going to disagree with you there. Online games make so crazy much money. Crazy much money. There is no reason why they couldn't actually have paid moderators.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because like, even though they don't have a moderator...
The gaming industry makes more money than Hollywood now.
They do, and they have for quite a while, but the thing is, at least with online games on console, like first-person shooters, there's a new one literally every year, and there's so many that I don't, it's hard to say, like Battlefield, in its first couple of months it made 5 million, whereas WoW, it just keeps growing. It's the same game, and all they do is expansions, and there's not that same...
So let's say, instead of trying to maintain mods indefinitely, because everybody usually wants the new shiny thing.
Yeah.
What if you had mods for the first 18 months of every game?
I think it could work.
Because that way the people that are getting into that game from the beginning are getting some sort of, cut it out type of influence. And if they're so obsessed with that behavior that they have to play an 18-month-old game, who wants to play an 18-month-old game?
Yeah, very true. But I think that's the only way it'd be financially viable is if they came out with Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 5 or the next Call of Duty and said, okay, we're going to be making the same game, but we're going to come out with expansions for it. And the same way they're doing with the WoW model, and then just do like a leveling pricing plan. Everything that they're doing now with MMOs these days, I think that would be much more financially viable, and also would work well or work better as far as having moderators. But now even with Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3, they had it to where, kind of like what Valve allowed with the Counter-Strike game, was that people could buy their own servers.
Yeah.
And have their own sets of maps and run it the way they want. So then it would just be a matter of finding the community that you wanted to go to and the kind of moderator. Because there's moderators that are like very kind of Orwellian in nature. Like, well, if you say hello to the wrong person, you're banned. And there's other ones where they're just completely liberal with their rules and like, well, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you camp. I don't care if you're cheating. It's all good. And then there's other ones that are, they try to be as in the middle as possible, and it's just basically a gamer that's just trying to find their fit into that community,
So what do you think, speaking of moderating the discussion here, about, because I've got another idea with this, what if you could, and I'm not sure how to go about starting this, but what if you could get volunteer groups of men, and I mean like grown-up adult men, that would like, hey, we all want to be a guild in this game, or equivalent of a guild in this game anyway, that would essentially, like, as their public service, as their community of good, whatever they're doing, get in there and just try and kind of clean up some communities. Do you think that's something that, A, would appeal to any grown-up men, that, especially fathers, I would think? Like, that might be the first group to start with. Like, well, are you a father a little bit worried that your son's about to turn into a horrible, sexist, homophobic racist?
Yeah.
Join our community, and we're going to try and talk to these kids. And I don't mean in a like, talking down to them, like, now, son, you know it's not nice to call a lady by that part. I mean getting in there and using... I don't mind the four-letter words. That is... Please. It's the racist, sexist, homophobic stuff that's a problem.
Yeah. But, at least with the FPS games, you kind of already have that to where there's people that go online onto the main games forums, and they say, hey, you know, I'm looking to start a clan. Let's do this. And you know, at least as far as on PC it works. Yeah. But as far as organizing it on console games, I'm not. I've been in a few myself, and I've been on the stricter side of things to where I join and I'm like half committed because at the time I was just having a kid. I was new to the whole father thing, so I was like, well, I got to go change natural diapers and I got to do this very progressive stuff that I really, you know, everything in my brain was telling me to fight it, and I was like slowly breaking. My wife was like slowly breaking it down, and I was like, okay, I have to wash this crap off now and throw it in the washer.
That's what it is.
Yeah. But, you know, I was really half committal at the time because, you know, I had a great record on Battlefield 2, Bad Company 2 at the time, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to join the clan, and I just had a kid last week, and I'm going to be on FMLA for 8 weeks. It's going to be great. Yeah. But most of that time was spent taking care of a brand new person. Yeah. You know? So I missed a couple of meetings, and I got dinged for it, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm sorry, but I was putting my kid to bed. It's 10:30. I'm available now. Yeah. It's 10:30 at night. I'm available now.
That is one of the problems with almost all games, and it's something that gets people kicked out of guilds all the time, especially on WoW, where like, my work schedule changed. I can't raid right now.
Yeah. Too bad you're out.
Yeah.
You know, and I was subject.
But I don't want to get off of that. Like I feel like the worst part of all of this is that so many people say game culture can't be changed. It is what it is, as though it rose from the sea, fully formed, and, you know, the gods of the ocean declared that this is the way it must be. It didn't. No. This isn't a natural thing. It's not a natural environment in the slightest. It is a man-made environment, and men, and I mean specifically people with penises, can change it. Because you're talking to young people with penises. They're not going to listen to me. Why would they? And I don't mean that in a mean way, but this is not who a 14-year-old's going to listen to. Yeah.
Yeah, what I was going to say, as it goes to moderating the games, it's one of those things where, you know, typically it's on someone's personal server where they do moderate. Yeah. But that's not to say that publishers themselves can't have moderators. Obviously, they have a lot of servers. It's expensive. But for one, they have the money. It's not that expensive. You pay a kid $10 to $12 an hour to be in there and make sure that
ICANN has moderators. You can't tell me that EA can't afford it.
And so many mods, like if you have like to take it to like just the internet in general, like forum mods, most of them are volunteers. Yeah. So there's no saying that someone can't volunteer to be a mod of many of the servers. And I'm sure that some servers are probably worse than others, so they can obviously prioritize, like, okay, these are the top 15 most notorious servers, and it's like, okay, let's prioritize, let's try and let these people know that there are consequences. I think that in and of itself, like, if you want to change behavior, you have to let people know, like, you can't treat people this way and speak to people this way and just get away with it. Yeah. I think if you actually have people where they're kicked from servers, have their accounts suspended, then they're going to be like, oh, I can't act that way. Yeah. And to tie that into the whole jail thing, a lot of people that end up in jail, and end up in jail a lot, don't have that mentality of, I get punished for what I do. Like,
it's always a surprise.
Yeah, like,
is it really always a surprise to them?
A lot of them, like, it doesn't sink in until they've been sentenced to like 40 years, and it's like, oh man, I guess I'm not going to get out of here anytime soon. Yeah, it's like
break some windows.
Yeah, it's like you know, they never really had this the idea ingrained into their head that there are consequences for actions. Like you know, you can't just the world isn't just free reign to do anything. Like you actually have to not only control yourself, but there are other powers bigger than you that can control you as well. And I think especially as it comes to games, like especially if you have the 14-year-old kid that's, you know, dropping all sorts of epithets, he's probably like one of the best players in there. So no one can touch him as far as the game is concerned. So he thinks he can say and do whatever. Yeah. But if a moderator comes in, that's the supreme power. That's the one telling you, you're great at this game. You love this game. We appreciate that you're playing our game, but you can't treat people like that. Yeah. And sooner or later, they're either going to have to change or stop playing the game altogether. Yeah.
And a good example of that was actually a StarCraft player named Idra, who was sponsored under the Evil Geniuses sponsorship brand. And he was kind of notorious for treating some of his fans or people in the StarCraft community like crap, at least on the forums. And he would say, you know, really hurtful words. Not so much racist, but I would say on a homophobic level. Or, you know, F you, F that, blah, blah, blah. You can't touch me, it doesn't matter what I say. And I think it was at one point where it was kind of somewhat of a PR scandal as far as the gaming community goes. And Evil Geniuses axed him out of the clear blue, just like, you're done.
Good for them.
And he found someone else, but he's not. I think he learned his lesson.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't kept up with the StarCraft community as much, after a couple months after that happened. But I follow him on Twitter, and I don't see him being as much of a hateful or scornful person.
I hate to say it, but just at that age especially, having some consequences and having them given to you by older, more experienced males makes a huge difference in a boy's in a boy's perception of things and in his actual behavior.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like I'm picking on guys. I obviously like guys. I have them right here in my house right now. We do this show every week. But I do feel like online console game culture is it's a failure of men. It's a failure of men to raise boys into good men.
Yeah. We need more elephants.
We need more elephants. This one went way, way over. I hope that you've made it all the way to the end. If so, we would really love to hear your comments down here. We will, in fact, go and moderate them or just ignore. It's, YouTube. We're going to ignore the trolls because whatever. We're not going to feed you. But I probably shouldn't have said that.
Also,
they're just like,
yes. There's a lot of running comments, especially on this side of the table. So if you felt like you need clarification on anything or would like us to expand on any topics more specifically,
he will write you a 9,000-word essay about the prison system, is what he's saying.
Go ahead and leave a comment on what you want explained, and we'll do our best to maybe make a whole episode out of it.
Yeah. And we would, in all seriousness, really, really like to see you get in there and start genuinely discussing what you think are some of the solutions to it. Because, it's a man-made problem, which means men can make the solutions. And what do you think of our crazy theories that maybe video games are a good way to keep kids off the street? We'd love to hear what you have to say about both.
#OccupyJuvie Gamers.